Good morning everybody and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Search Laboratory entitled Joining Offline Conversions to Online Clicks. My name's Ian Harris and I'm the CEO of Search Laboratory and I'll be hosting today's webinar. But the main presenter today is our Head of Analytics, Paul Shearing, who I'll be introducing shortly. For those of you who are not familiar with Search Laboratory, we were founded in 2005 and grew rapidly to become one of the UK's leading digital marketing agencies, with our service offering covering PPC, SEO, programmatic display, social media, and importantly for this session today, analytics consultancy and insights. Our head office is in Leeds, but we have offices in London and New York, and our aim has always been to put data at the heart of everything that we do, and it's this scientific core that is the reason that we actually called ourselves the Search Laboratory. We just found out we're in the Times Top 100 Employers for the 5th year running, which is something we're incredibly proud of, and we're also number 16 in the 2017 Lloyd's Export Track 100 due to the amount of international work we do. But more crucially for today, we're the top level of Google Analytics service partner. So on to the webinar today, and analytics is now for most companies the single most important element of their digital marketing focus. And in a recent stat from Google, 81% of senior marketers say that attribution is their biggest challenge, but 71% feel that it's difficult and they struggle to see where to start. So it's obviously a big issue at the moment. The technology has become so advanced with attribution modeling tools, integration with online and offline data sources, and audience building and integration, and navigating through this technology is becoming increasingly difficult, but it's critical if you're going to beat your competitors online. So our mission today is to help you with this, and we're looking at one subset of this landscape today, and that's joining offline data to analytics. The possibilities of what you can do in this area have leapt forward over the last couple of years, and our goal over the next 45 minutes is to share some insights and some examples and give you techniques that you can actually go away and implement yourselves. So just some housekeeping. The webinar will last around 45 minutes in total. There will be some time at the end for questions. So that's included in the 45 minutes, so we'd love to hear your questions. Please send these via the chat function. So that's on the right hand side on the little panel that you can see. You can collapse that panel so you can see the screen or expand it out, but there's a little box that says type message here, so please put your questions in there at any time during the presentation, and we'll try and get to all of your questions at the end. So if, just another point on questions, if you don't mind us saying which company you're from, please put it in the box, because sometimes it just adds a little bit of context to the question and helps everyone understand the issue that you're asking about. If you don't put that in there, we won't mention where you're from. We are recording the webinar today, so we're going to share it out via email in the next 24 hours, so please don't worry about taking notes or screenshots as we go along. You'll get a full recording. So it's now my pleasure to introduce your presenter for the webinar today, so that's Paul Shearing. Paul has been with Search Laboratory for 11 years, and in that time has been instrumental in our focus on data. He built the foundations of our statistical bidding software, BidLab, and now he heads up our analytics and data science team. Paul's background before Search Laboratory was in actuarial analysis, which is, they're the people that work out the stats behind insurance policy. So making sense of huge data sets is Paul's speciality. He now gets involved in bespoke and hard analytics implementations, and what he doesn't know about analytics is genuinely not worth knowing. So without further ado, it's over to you, Paul.
Hi, thanks for that, Ian, and welcome to everybody that's on the webinar today. So yeah, as Ian said, it's going to be my job today to kind of talk you through this problem of being able to understand what's going on offline. And to do that, I've just got a simple agenda here that I'll run through. So I want to start by just presenting what the problem is, so we're all clear in our own minds about that problem, and it's different for different companies. And then I'll run through the kind of solution and the main concepts that underpin that solution. And then to bring that to life a little bit, I'll run through specific scenarios using a couple of examples. And then at the end, like Ian said, there's going to be plenty of time for questions, so please do use the chat function in the webinar software to ask anything you want, and we'll get to that later. So to start with then, the problem, and this is kind of a typical lead generation kind of website we're talking about here. You know, in this day and age, we're very good at understanding what goes on your own website, and the analytics solutions out there are fantastic for helping you do that. So, you know, in this example, you might see that someone comes to your website 3 times, and then they fill in a web form. But the problem comes with knowing what that web form is worth, and you know, often a web form filled in from one campaign is very different to a web form filled in from a different campaign. So, you know, in this case, a typical lead generation company might phone that person back, you know, hopefully set up a meeting, and if everything goes well, you'll get a sale out of the end of it. You know, so if you had this full picture, then you would be you'd get a lot more insight into your marketing campaigns. Again, this is another example, so a B2C kind of website I've used here, and one that uses it as their conversion strategy, offering samples. So we're thinking here of curtains or blinds or wooden flooring. You know, people want a sample before they commit to spending hundreds of pounds. You know, so your website is currently probably very good at tracking how those samples are obtained and what channels and marketing spend drives that. But the problem lies in that often what goes on offline is then not linked to those campaigns. So, you know, typically you might, you know, somebody might phone in and make a purchase over the phone, or you might even have an outbound sales team that phones people up and pesters them into making the purchase. You know, without that insight, it's very hard to truly know which marketing campaigns are driving those sales. This is, again, a huge problem for high street retailers. You know, very often you'll spend a lot of money driving traffic to your website, and they'll seemingly be very engaged and look at all your products. You know, a lot of them then just leave, and you know, without the insight that actually a lot of them will be going into a store and making a purchase. Again, it's very hard to you know, effectively value the marketing campaigns and attribute your in-store sales to what's going on online. And finally, the example scenario here is a kind of B2B catalog business, not necessarily B2B, it could be B2C, but any, you know, traditional catalog business that has a lot of offline activity as well as online. So, you know, another example might be office supplies. You know, you've got a lot of activity going on your website, but a lot going on off your website. So, you know, using a non-advanced analytics implementation, you might get information that you can see here about which online visits and what sales are going on. But you may also have a lot of other activity going on. So you may do a lot of direct marketing. You may send out catalogs to customers in your database. You may transact over the phone or using web forms or even in-store if you have a retail network. And finally, then you've got returns that are a big problem for any retail business. And being able to understand these it completes the picture really, and it's a big problem not having that information linked with your analytics data. So I've given you kind of a graphical description there of what the problem is, and I just wanted to illustrate that further really with a few figures to bring it to life how important that this understanding really is. So here we've got a company that sells CRM solutions, which is kind of a business software. You know, you'd be forgiven looking at those two keyword campaigns for thinking that they're indifferent, they're performing equally as well as each other, and you'd probably push budget towards them equally. But then if you supplemented that with what goes on once that form has been filled in and what goes on offline with your sales team, you know, you might get a very different picture. And you can see in this example I've given here, you know, the cloud-based CRM solutions campaign is performing significantly over 4 times, over 5 times as well as the general campaign. And you know, you might hypothesize that that's because it's a more specific or a more direct keyword that is related to your product. Again, back to the curtains and blinds example, a company like that might run 2 campaigns for curtains and blinds, and you know, just looking at what we've got here, you'd be forgiven again for thinking that the blinds campaign is actually doing a little bit better. But when you again supplement that with what actually happens offline, you can see there that actually the value of these curtain orders means that that campaign is getting a significantly better ROI. So without this information, it's very hard to make judgments and decisions on your marketing budgets online. So another one is back to the high street retailer example, and you know, a fashion company might have 2 campaigns promoting socks and dresses. You know, on the face of it, from what you're tracking online, you know, the socks campaigns are clearly outperforming the dresses campaign in this example. But you supplement that with some more information about what people go on to do in stores as well, and as you can see there, the dresses campaign is actually performing significantly better. And you might hypothesize here that, you know, people are happy to just buy socks without looking at them and trying them on. I've never tried socks on before I've bought them. But dresses is a bigger purchase, or people might want to you know, go in and touch and feel them before they make that purchase. So there we've got the problem, and I suppose now it's about talking you through the solution. And I'm presenting a solution which uses Google Analytics, which is the widest used analytics package in the world. But there are similar solutions for other analytics packages. But yeah, this will be Google Analytics specific. So to start with, there's 2 main concepts that are really underpin the whole solution, and I'll talk you through these in a bit more detail later. But the first one is something called the measurement protocol. The measurement protocol is a Google feature that basically deals with how you get data into Google Analytics. I'll talk you through that more shortly. The second concept is what I'll refer to as the join key. And this join key is again, this relates to how you associate what goes on online with what goes on offline, and what you push in using the measurement protocol. So there's actually 2 different methods you could use to tackle this concept. There's something called using the Google Analytics ID, and there's which is basically something that the Google technology would give you, and the CRM ID, which comes from your software. I'll talk you through those later. So the measurement protocol. So what is the measurement protocol? It's effectively a published format for getting data, hit-level data, into your Google Analytics account, and that, you know, so when you install the regular tracking script on your website, Google have written a JavaScript library which does all the hard, clever stuff, and it works out your screen resolution and the source of campaign you've come from, and all the dimensions you see in your analytics account. It then pushes that to Google Analytics servers in a format that uses the measurement protocol. So Google have been kind enough to publish that format, so us as businesses can implement hit tracking from other applications. And you know, the thing to point out here is that any networked device or application can process information and send it to Google Analytics using the measurement protocol. You know, the three examples we've got there are a server from your back-end systems, you know, point of sale software in a retail outlet, or, you know, field sales operatives that maybe have a tablet out in the sales field. So yeah, just to illustrate a little bit more about what this measurement protocol actually is, and it sounds complicated, but it's actually very, very simple. And at its kind of most simple level, it is being able to construct a URL that sends tracking information to Google. So on the screen in front of you, you'll be able to see a URL, and within there, there's bits of information. This is just an example. Some of the information some of you will be familiar with. The TID shows the kind of user account, which, you know, should be on every page of your website. You know, the CID stands for client ID. This is an ID that identifies the person that we're tracking. You know, and that T equals page view just shows kind of what kind of hit type you're sending. But there's hundreds of different dimensions you could send within the measurement protocol. And you know, it's too much to run through now, but you know, the main point is it's a URL that a developer will find simple to implement. So, you know, just to illustrate further what you might send using the measurement protocol. So this is an example using Salesforce. You know, you might have a salesperson that books a meeting, and when they do that, they'll click a button in Salesforce to set up a meeting record. And on that event, you would want to run a script that basically pushed, you know, in this example, I would suggest a Google Analytics event, and you might set parameters on that event of offline meeting booked and any other information. So, you know, I've put there custom dimensions and custom metrics. You know, if there's metadata or parameters around that meeting booking you wanted to track, you know, you could implement other advanced features such as these custom dimensions to track that information and see that within your analytics account. A more straightforward one, which everyone will be able to relate to, when you make a purchase at a retail outlet, you could customize and program your point of sale technology to push hits, these transaction hits, to Google Analytics, and that would track the standard transaction information you would see in your regular Google Analytics account. You know, you would need to be able to identify that person somehow using a, you know, loyalty card or email or some other method, but that's another example. So yeah, that's measurement protocol deals with how you get information into Google Analytics, and you know, it's relatively straightforward for a developer to implement, I would say, and you know, we would help kind of guide people through that as well. So we're coming on now to the what I referred to earlier as the join key, and this is really a method of associating the people that are on your website with people that do things offline. So the first of these methods is what's I call Google's internal ID, and it's referred to as the client ID. So when you visit a website that has Google Analytics on, the tracking code on that website will check to see if you've got a cookie for Google Analytics. If you don't have it, we'll set one up and it'll add to it an ID, and that ID identifies you every time you go back to the website. So you know, ultimately what we need to do is extract and take that ID and pass it back to your kind of CRM, and then when you process information using the measurement protocol, if you use that ID, it is associated with those online sessions. So, you know, to extract that, you could, technically speaking, a developer could just access the cookie directly, but that is not a recommended way of doing things. There is a published interface and a published kind of function within the Google Analytics library that lets you get this information, and once you've extracted it, you can then use it however you want on your website using JavaScript. And how you know, an example of how you would use that, in the example of a form, you know, you would add a hidden field to a form, and then programmatically using a bit of JavaScript, we'd do it hopefully using Google Tag Manager to take the onus away from the developer. But the main point is you extract that ID and put it in a hidden field, and when you submit that record to your CRM, alongside the name and the email address, you will have an ID, and that is the ID you can then use using the measurement protocol. So I'll just run through an example now of a client that we've done this for in the past, and the kind of the benefits that were achieved from it. So a law firm here is law and compensation keywords are extremely expensive, so it's very important to understand the outcomes of your marketing. In this example, they had lots of complex campaigns sending traffic to the website, and that traffic, hopefully, it was a lead generation website, but that traffic is intended to generate form fills or phone calls, and we refer to those as actions. But the important thing here is that once those actions have occurred, offline, somebody would filter and filter out the spammy or low-value ones and only enter into their CRM the significant, the ones that are worth pursuing, and they'd be called inquiries. Hopefully, those inquiries would turn into kind of accepted cases, and hopefully down the line, won cases. So, when we started working with this client, there was no insight really into what happened in Proclaim, which is their case management software. So, to implement the solution, we asked developers to add hidden fields to all forms within their website, and then using Google Tag Manager, we managed to process this tracking script that extracted the ID out of the Google Analytics cookie and inserted it into that hidden field. And whenever any form then got submitted to the to their CRM, alongside that record sat this client ID, and that is what they used to process the measurement protocol hits. To complicate things further in this case, and this is a very high-level example, but it's to show that it's possible even when people make phone calls. So they use a solution called Response Tap. I don't know if people are aware of what these solutions do, but ultimately they give out a unique phone number to every visitor to the website, and there's a big pool of numbers that get recycled. So, if I went on, I would get that phone number highlighted in red, and if I make a phone call, their Response App can push data and information about that phone call to Google Analytics against that person. So there's a bit of a customization we had to do to push this client ID, because that's a non-standard dimension and a piece of data. But ultimately, we managed to get the client ID through Response App system and into Proclaim, their CRM. And once we've got that, as I said before, we could push information about what happens offline into Google Analytics. So a bit of a run through of the overall solution here. We've always been able to track form fills, page views, visits, phone calls into Google Analytics, but after we had implemented this customization and integration, we were able to push this client ID into Proclaim, and once they had that, we had the ability to track anything that happens offline into that Google Analytics account and link it to the people that submitted the original form and the marketing spend that drove it. So, just to run through top-level outcomes of what that really meant, because, it sounds very clever, but ultimately, there needs to be a point in doing this. So, we managed to increase profit dramatically on this client. It gave us specifically a 300% increase in high-value cases. And separately and importantly, because we managed to understand the conversion rate from people completing actions, so that's form fills or phone calls or form fills, because we understood the conversion rate from actions to accepted cases, and we could do that at campaign and keyword level, we were able to spot that actually campaigns that were perceived as almost not worth doing or unprofitable actually turned out to be very, very profitable, because they were converting much more offline than they expected. And as a result, they kind of changed their entire kind of business strategy on the back of this new insight. So I suppose that demonstrates that really this is such a powerful feature, and these insights are really kind of business changing in some cases. Okay, so the example and what I've just explained is relates to the client ID. So there's an alternative way of linking offline stuff with online activity, and that's what's called the user ID feature. So this is kind of basically using your internal ID within your CRM. So against every record of a person, you will have an ID internally. And the thing that underpins this is implementing an advanced feature of Google Analytics, which is called the user ID feature. And ultimately, all that means is whenever somebody visits your website, you need to output that ID of that person in the tracking code. And once that's output in the tracking code, all these sessions can be joined up together, even if they're cross-device. So that's the main aim of it, really, cross-device tracking. But also, more importantly for this webinar, is you can then join what goes on offline and try and get more insights into that behavior. The one key point to mention here that underpins this solution is that you need to be able to identify people, and really that means people that have logged in, authenticated sites. Any sessions to be joined up and tracked in this way need to have that ID output within them. But the most important thing is if you're trying to associate specific sessions, so I'm thinking here of maybe the curtain samples example I showed before. If somebody signs up for a sample in a session, you need to output that user ID in that session, which kind of is critical, really. So I'll just run through a kind of scenario of a business and what they could get out of doing this integration using the user ID feature. And like I said, this is really, the user ID method is really more aimed at understanding ongoing relationships with clients and customers, I should say. But in this example here, you might be tracking what's going on online, but then a catalogue and office supplies company might carry out a lot of offline direct marketing activity. So there's two things here. You could, firstly, you could identify users that have performed or carried out some behavior online, extract that from Google Analytics, and use that to determine who you do mail shots and direct marketing to. But also then you can understand people's behavior across the two mediums, offline and online. You can track all of, using this solution, you'll be able to track in-store purchases or purchases that are carried out over the phone. A company like this would transact quite a lot of that, perhaps. And also, you can track refunds, which is a big problem for any retailer, especially in industries such as fashion and clothing, for example. Same company, you might also do a lot of catalogue activity, so you might send catalogues out every half year, and there's two things again you can do with this. Firstly, you could understand the behaviour of those users that receive catalogues, so you'd be able to identify responders and non-responders, and you may decide to perform more offline direct marketing to the responders and less to the non-responders. The other thing you'd be able to do is to create remarketing audiences on the back of things you carry out offline. And what this ultimately means is, you'll be able to start showing remarketing ads to people that you've just sent a catalogue, and you can join up your online and your offline marketing efforts much more effectively. So yeah, that's kind of an example of a solution of a website or company that has an ongoing relationship, and the user ID feature really is to track that. I've just put a couple of points here on about maximizing the effectiveness of this user ID feature. I said earlier that it's critical really that you get this user ID output in everybody's web session, if it's at all possible. And to help do that, there's kind of two things I would always recommend, and that's one of which is adopted this a kind of persisted login. So even if if you go to some websites now, that I'll see at the top of the page it'll say hello Paul, and I may have to log in to do anything sensitive like editing payment details. Ultimately, they store who I am in a cookie, and if this persisted kind of login method would allow you to output that user ID even if they don't actually type in their password in that session. Another thing to mention is take every opportunity to set that user. So, if you're performing email marketing campaigns, it's a good idea to make sure that the website understands there's something in the URL that they may click that takes that user's ID and sets up that cookie and allows you to identify that person. So, we've talked about the two methods, client ID or the user ID method, and I just wanted to run through really which one you should choose, which is usually relatively straightforward. But yeah, ultimately the client ID method is more suited to marketing campaigns and businesses where you would typically start, a customer would typically start the research process online, and hopefully they would transact or do some form fill, but ultimately you would finish the kind of whole process offline. So this is typical B2B lead generation website. If there's no logged in process on your website, it's kind of the only real solution as well. So the user ID method, like I said before, is more suited to tracking and understanding an ongoing relationship between things that are going on offline and online, and this ultimately means logged in systems. There is as well, I've not put it on this slide, but there is the possibility of actually using both, and there are a few scenarios where that would also be worth doing. So yeah, I hope all that's made sense then, and the kind of solution that I've presented is makes sense to everyone. So I just wanted to do one last run through really of exactly what that means in terms of the benefits that you would get out of it. So ultimately you'd be able to get a much improved understanding of being able to attribute all of your sales and not just what you can see online. And in some businesses that is significant. You'd get the ability to kind of optimize your online campaigns for the true ROI, so you'd get the full insight of, or a fuller insight of everything it's contributing towards. You'd be able to understand this relationship between what's going on and offline and take actions to maybe perhaps make those two marketing efforts work a little bit more together and join up those efforts. Again, you'd be able to link in-store sales, and you kind of get to understand the effect of returns, which again is, well, at campaign level, which again is critical really for some retail organisations. So on that note, I guess it's kind of, I'll pass back to Ian, who's been taking everybody's questions, and yeah, I look forward to hearing what people want to hear about.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. So we have questions coming in, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. We've had a question which was which method is more effective, the measurement protocol or the join key? But that question came in before the summary of the measurement protocol and the join key. So I'm hoping that one's been answered. But I suppose in summary, the join key is only it is applicable if you have a logged-in website. So some websites do not have the luxury of being able to use the join key, and therefore the measurement protocol is kind of what's left for them. But we do have clients that use both of these, and they're doing attribution across both. So I hope that one's answered.
Just to add to that aspect, the measurement protocol and the join key, there you need to get the solution to it, you need both of them. The choice you have to make is which join key you use. So that choice is the client ID or the user ID. And that really is ultimately about the type of business. So like I said in that last but one slide, the client ID is more suited to people where, there's activity on your website and then the activity transfers offline and you kind of finish the sales process offline. The user ID is more suited to where you've got a logged in system and you want to track an ongoing relationship. So again, where you're a catalog company where you've got customers that keep coming back and you want to join that activity together.
Okay, thanks for that. So we have another question. How are the online channels tracked and assigned if they're not related to Google? So I might need a bit of qualification on this question. If you have Google Analytics, all channels, even if they're not coming from Google, all channels are tracked within Google Analytics. So sessions that come from social, sessions that come from display advertising, they will be tracked in Google Analytics, and therefore you can, so even email marketing, that any clicks that come from that activity, they will be actually tracked within Google Analytics. So I'm hoping that answers that question. How are the online channels tracked and assigned if they're not related to Google? But if that doesn't, then please get back to us and we'll elaborate on that. We've got another one here. We're a B2C company, but don't have a login because they're one-off sales, so watches and jewellery. Should we use client ID or user ID? Paul.
Yeah, so I guess in that case, and given that they're one-off sales and given that you don't have a login, the kind of only real solution is the client ID for you. And that would help track, because you're interested in understanding the run-up, the path to the initial inquiry, and then hopefully that goes on to convert into a sale. So really, yeah, that is more suited to the client ID, and there's not really an option for a user ID there because you've not got a logged in kind of solution or website.
Okay. We're a travel company with multiple CRMs for different regions. Is that an issue?
A good question. I guess it's only an issue from an implementation point of view. So, you've got different CRMs for different regions, but I'm assuming that, Joe Bloggs from the UK is in one and somebody else from the US, for example, is in another. And as long as your users have a unique ID and your developers are able to output that ID in the web session, then it shouldn't be really. I suppose the hard bit is on the implementation side, which you'd have to kind of streamline the authentication process on your website. When somebody logs in, the user ID that you output gets pulled from the relevant CRM system. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so basically it's entirely possible. It's just that it gets harder as you add more CRMs. So this one is from a company that has got loads of data already, and the setup of I think probably this is all about the development time of getting these techniques set up. What sort of KPIs would you suggest we use to make sure we're making the most of this additional data? So it's proving the case.
Yes, thanks, Ian. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure I fully understand that question, but when you say KPIs, I guess you mean, what KPIs do you want to measure offline, and that again ultimately is kind of down to your business and you know, what is it you're trying to measure offline? So, you know, if it's ultimately, you know, in a B2B example, lead generation example, you know, you want to track final completed sales, but there's other things in between, like booking a meeting or qualifying a lead, that are also significant metrics. You know, so I guess, you know, they're the KPIs you should be aiming to, and every business is different. Whether, you know, there was mention there of the cost and time to set these things up, and if it's worth it, I think Ian mentioned. So that ultimately again is down to how big the problem is for your business. You know, if 90% of transactions are done offline, you've got a big problem, and it's worth investing fairly heavily in, you know, understanding that problem, because otherwise you may be wasting marketing budget. You know, there's an opportunity if, you know, probably in your industry, it'll be the same for your competitors. There's a huge opportunity in understanding this problem before your competitors, because there's not many people doing this kind of technique, really.
Yeah, and I suppose the techniques that we're talking about allow you to actually start measuring the KPIs that are the ones that are relevant for your business. So in the law firm example, you know, implementing these techniques allowed us to measure the right KPIs, which was actual business value rather than sign-up forms. So, you know, in answer to this question as well, you'll be measuring sort of pound note KPIs as opposed to some sort of sales indicator KPIs, and the impact of this is you know, for that law firm, 300% increase in the types of cases that they really wanted to improve, and a business switch into cases that they didn't know were entirely relevant. So we do have a couple more questions, but we'll get back to people afterwards because we're fast running out of time. So we've only got 2 minutes left. So I just want to summarise just by saying thanks to everyone for joining. And in summary, you can post almost anything you want into analytics now using the measurement protocol and the tools that Paul's explained. And your aim in all of this is to create yourself a view of your business in an analytics dashboard that shows true business value rather than these sort of pre-indicators like inquiries, samples, you know, one-off sales, catalog requests. Now you can start optimizing for actual business value, and that's including you know, returns and all of that stuff. So yeah, so it's pretty powerful stuff, and you know, from our experience, you can steal a march on your competitors doing this stuff. Not many people are doing it and doing it well, so just get on it. It's not as difficult as you might think. Do feel free to get in touch if you have any specific questions. There's our details on the screen right now. If you've got any questions about anything we've mentioned today, any aspect of analytics, you know, standard analytics, Analytics 360, which is the sort of the big brother of the standard package, which gives you additional features such as, you know, advanced attribution, data-driven attribution modeling, that type of thing. But if there's anything about your digital marketing generally, then please do get in touch. But all that remains is for me to say thanks everybody for your time. We hope you found the insights interesting and useful, and thanks very much, Paul, for your insights. And goodbye.